Daniel's here. Correctivity for homeostasis, and thereby systemic autonomy and sovereignty for European peoples, genus, and species. All right then. Reflecting upon a few things discussed in the last show with Snorkel Blog, and glad as always to have occasion to apply correctivity, because it was an afternoon show for me in my time, and that's not my best time. That's when my melatonin's depleted. I do better at nighttime like this here, Central European time, or in the morning when my melatonin's replenished. But the place I'd like to begin, and where I might have done better if I was more on the ball in that moment, was when Snorkelborg said that he liked Plato, found Plato to be a particularly worthwhile philosopher, and I responded, well, there's nothing wrong with that. And in general, there isn't. People concerned with European history should obviously be familiar with Plato, the Republic, and the Dialogues. However, I was taking for granted, which is where we usually make mistakes, the fact that I had sort of addressed the issue with Plato in the podcast before, when I was talking with Mirth Barron. And the issue is this. In Plato, it can be said, broadly speaking, is developing a worldview in response to the sophists and their rhetorical gamesmanship. Not a quest for the truth, but a quest to win the argument in the situation. A noble premise, of course, but where he goes with it into the forms has a good and bad aspect that I should have, which is what I might have discussed with Snorkelborg. Snorkelblock, I'm sorry. The good aspect of the forms being detached from our lived reality is that they can provide an ideal and an inspiration and even fire imagination. For our aspirations. Now, the problem, there's a problem there as well, however. that you're setting in that detachment, you're setting forth the Cartesian detachment when you are, and the very phenomenon it seems of that's playing out to this day of where our people, let's say, beginning with a stage, well, liking the YKW to the sophists, and they're taking the social realm and the gamesmanship and the concern merely to win, not with truth and what's right and what's just. And a reaction is being triggered with it. That gamesmanship gives way to. Thanks, Born Again. Hold on. Tell me about my audio. That gamesmanship then takes the form of Christianity, in which they have red-caped and created this false opposition, and in fact taken over our entire moral order, which is, an offense to our people. Could not be more egregious. But that's what happened. And then, with that, the guilt trips and the purity spirals that culminate in the synchronon of Descartes' detachment from the natural world. And this is an infamous, the apex, where modernity, where we might trace the setting forth of modernity, and much of the problems of Western philosophy. Now, Aristotle had a way of bringing back the telos, the teleology, from the detached forms, and looking upon it as the end of natural growth, and furthermore bringing this teleology into not only the social world, but into a model of humankind based in biology and our mammalian nature, and the fact that as biological creatures we require an optimality of need satisfaction rather than maximality or deficiency, of course. Now then, I think it was the LaRoche people, but anyway, there's a problem with what Aristotle's doing there, in a sense that he is depriving the world of imagination and aspiration and the, let's say, Promethean striving beyond what might be our inborn limits. And the reconciliation of that, the Cartesian detachment, and the need for a liberation from mere facticity, as not just a mere liberation from mere facticity, but that inspiration, not merely, but also the liberation from mere facticity for a reason, from the arbitrariness of the flux of the into which we're thrown, so that we can establish coherence, accountability, agency, warrant, all those good things. Hermeneutics is Europe's philosophical answer, or one of the ways, or the chief way for managing this, for negotiating between the empirical and the narrative. This distinction occurs within our individual selves and within our group. We have a corporeal being, it's a physical being. We also have a narrative or autobiographical self. And the same would apply to our people. We have our people who are physical, genetic, biological entities. And we also have historical narratives. Now, these that we tell to make sense of ourselves as a people. And this narrative, this hermeneutic part, is absolutely essential. And again, this is where there's a corrective on Aristotle in his sort of overly rational approach, let's say, and a corrective on Plato, where he gives way to that detachment, which eventually culminates in Cartesian detachment. Now then, okay. So hermeneutics, this narrative in historical perspectivism, is part of our distinctly human nature. But notice that from the beginning of a concept, it's functioning in circularity. So it's coming back, it's going from the imaginative to the rigorous application to empirical verification. That circulating process of inquiry is how it's done to avoid getting caught in the over speculation of theory beyond nature, or in the arbitrary flux, the confusing arbitrary flux, tangles, binds, dilemmas of the factitious empirical world. Now, again, a group, to maintain its coherence, is going to require the negotiation, this hermeneutic negotiation, for its historical place and temporal breadth, temporal systemic breadth. Okay. This is crucially important. I don't care if people want to continue to listen to these stupid right wingers, these dissident writers about what they think that post-modernity is supposed to be about. But this hermeneutic turn is what post-modernity is supposed to be about, in the management of, and the stabilization and the maintenance of our inherited forms. So anyway, I just wanted to, that's the first correction that I wanted to make towards last show, is when I said there's nothing wrong with Plato. Well, not exactly. I hate what's happening to white people too. Born again, Harapan, whoever you are. And not only as a group, I think one of the things that inspires me in a negative way is the qualitative losses of individuals and our way of life. It tears me apart. So this is the way. This is the hermeneutic turn, and you're beginning to understand how it's supposed to function, and what it is that our enemies don't want you to understand. And you'll hear it in everybody that you listen to, just about everybody in the dissident right is following the Paul Gottfried-like marketing program against the left. Now, in reacting to this sophistry, to the YKW deploying social organizing and unionizing, coalition building, and advocacy, distorting it, red caping it, as I say, making it ridiculous and weaponizing it against us. Even you're going to have they are succeeding in getting the same old kind of reactions. They've always wanted us to identify as right wing, far right. Now they've taken it a bit further to suit their convenience, to say that this is what the left is. They never talk about our left, what our ethno-nationalist left would look like by contrast. But they get people like Semiagog, for example. I might have mentioned this last time, but didn't. Provides a perfect example of a reactionary. And Semiagog will be saying, "Oh, they've got this anthropocentric worldview, and it's really terrible. And I'm gonna find the I'm gonna find the precise semiotic corollaries and show the world that it's not at all arbitrary, that we are real, that we are a reality, and just like uh, wolves mark their territories and their parameters, and they'll piss higher on a tree to show who has the highest marker. I'm gonna figure it all out, without language, because language is just the world of deception. And it's really, really, he's just showing his foolish reactionary colors to the sophistry of people who don't want us to have the proper understanding of what the postmodern turn is supposed to do, what the hermeneutic turn is supposed to do. Okay. Worshipping black Israelite. You worship the black race. We are the superior, and you're a white woman that worship us. And okay, we're gonna have to get rid of this guy. Block user. Bye bye. I don't need to be trolled by you. Well, Bateson would call that what Semyagogue is trying to do is an attempt to return to the innocence of mood signs. Mood signs are what the zoologists call things like territorial pissings, or sticking out your neck and letting the other wolf pretend bite it to show that you're not really an enemy. You're not really. This is play. It's not real fight. In other words, he's as much as saying that he can't handle the complexity of, or doesn't want to deal with the complexity of the social world, and the fact of agency and reflexivity there. And there are of course there's the disadvantage that people, our enemies, can challenge our borders. They can try to say that it's not an absolute reality, and it's, especially when it comes to this, our people as distinct. They have the argument that we can interbreed with others, and therefore it's hardly a distinction that has to be. Well, they could even try to call it, an illusion, a mere social construct. Having said that, by the same token, we can and we should, because we can't deny the fact that, much to Semyagogue's chagrin, our borders can be contested, even if we might say with veracity that not really with particularly great arguments, but they can be contested. Nevertheless, making that concession, pretty much because we have to, we can deploy social constructionism as it should be to avail ourselves of the agency of the fact by claiming, by asserting our borders and boundaries. And with that agency is, it's part and parcel of accountability and the means to coherence for our people and warranted assertability and operational verifiability. Okay, so there is that discomfort, but it's that slight discomfort that yet there is a tiny bit, a modicum of arbitrariness to the border drawing, social construction to the border drawing. Doesn't mean that the borders aren't real. Social constructionism proper does not say that there's not a reality there. There's not facts. Just always maintaining the capacity for agency. And we just say how things count. So we say how our European peoples come to count, how our history counts. We assert this, what our genetic capital is worth, what our social capital is worth. And we establish borders and boundaries, citizenship being the crux of the matter. And with that concept of unionization that they don't want us to have, that they've red-caped under the concept of the left, they want us to chase away and be repulsed by all ideas of social organization, hermeneutic management, coalition building, social construction, social organization and advocacy, social justice. They want us to be against social justice, can you imagine? But once we're able to finally overcome these dimwits of the dissident right and who are being suckered into this language game, into this marketing program by the masters of discourse, we understand that the concept of unionization for our nations, even for our nations of people and for the genus and species, that it does indeed scale, contrary to what GW in his retardation might say. It does indeed scale, and that it structures accountability, the means of accountability, and that's all important. Now, there's another thing that I should have said to Snorkel Blog when he said that he is by nature a liberal. Now I'm realizing that I'm talking to the guy who's extremely intelligent, but coming this late, and he still hasn't sorted out some of the broad strokes. So what I might have said to him is that, yeah, I mean, we are liberal by nature, of course. We want to be, we want to maximize our agency as individuals and as a group. And this is not a problem in the sense that this is what paradigmatic conservatism is. It means conservative borders and boundaries, and um, relatively free individuals, free of excessive accounts requested. It's not the Stasi here, and really just a relatively liberal individual way of life within bounds and within reason, of course. Strong borders, strong boundaries to the civic group, but relatively free individual liberty within. Okay. Do I belong to a group? I would say so. Yes, I belong to the Europeans. That's the group that I belong to. And other groups, I suppose. Now then, there was a thought that I was connecting to when we talked about structuring of accountability and in individual liberties within and accounts requested. I remember where I wanted to go next. Now, I'm going to get some complaints because here I am promoting the concept of DNA nations for the sake of preserving our European kinds, genus, and species. No conflict with other people's preserving theirs, but of being European, that's the fundamental concern, especially because we're under attack, as anybody with any sense can observe. And unionization structures accountability. What are you doing talking to this guy who is living in Japan, married to a Japanese woman, has two half Japanese kids, or one and another on the way? Well, the Europeans, okay, that's a big group, but okay. Well, yeah, I've had to settle on that, but I settle on the position of European because it really, frankly, I was not able to enmesh well enough with either Italians or Polish, and I decided my role as an expat American is better, and European as a European generally. Is I'm doing more of a service on the level of negotiating between the different kinds and of the kind European, because I like them all and I don't really want warring between us. This thing that's going on in Ukraine is anathema. Or the dimwits. I could be a bit cruel. Anybody, the dissident writers who are just about all of them are railing against the left and the characterology of the left. That's what I'm talking about. I call them dimwits. They're, most of them are, in at least in some ways, very smart, very high IQ, whatever. Obviously someone like Greg Johnson isn't exactly a dimwit, but on a few in a few aspects, yes. Anyway, okay, so maybe this is too much my subjective perspective to not see a modicum of Asian admixture as particularly bad. It would have to be managed, of course, and our scientists would have to determine. Now we're always making sure that we have sufficient quantity and qualities of the pure representatives of our genetic kind. But we can also manage, I think, a place and an amount of, let's say, Asian admixture. Obviously, it can't be. Oh, maybe I'm wrong about that, and it's definitely a digression or a divergence from some of the WN 1.0 people. I know Fraser Glenn Miller was like given a real hard time, and even disowned his own half Vietnamese daughter. Not that I'm endorsing Fraser Glenn Miller, but I'm just saying this. There were some guys are really strict about this, and well, anyway, I think that there are gray areas which can be handled. Snorkel Blog himself, I think, would agree that this stuff that's got to be considered very carefully. It's no trivial issue, and it might be even worse from the perspective of Japanese men. But another subjective, well, begins with subjective but goes to the objective reason behind this is that I really believe that the Japanese and the Koreans are allied ethno-nations that we should seek out. And now there's some people, there's objective reasons for this too. I mean, you look at Japan, and that's a kind of culture and that we can admire, and their what they produce of themselves we can appreciate. This is not like the kind of thing that you experience from sub-Saharan Africa, or, for example, with regard to that population, I would try to keep admixture to close to zero, as close to zero as possible. And there's objective basis in ethnic genetic interests that they are, in fact, the farthest removed. I'm going to get some complaints. It is a bit tricky because they're going to say, well, how do women feel about this? Well, really, I'm sorry, but it's not nearly as bad for a guy to go with an Asian as it is for a woman to go with. So it's not nearly as destructive. Now it should be kept to a minimum, and it bears criticism. too many guys, I'm sure, have yellow fever, and that would be hurtful. And worse than that, it gives our women an excuse to betray us, I suppose. So really, it's not something that I want to be too liberal about. I want to just really go right at the fact that I'm willing to deal with these gray areas and complexities that I'm not that this is not what people think, 1,000% purity scale. Now, I want to mention in this unionization, I want to mention the preliminary means for dealing with admixed kinds. It's like, for example, and this is a clunky specificatory structure that hypothesis that scientists can throw away in a heartbeat and do whatever they must. But for example, I would say to someone who is 1/4 this, say 1/4, if they're 1/4 kosher, I would say that's too much, and they got to be they've got to go with the kosher folks. If they are, say, 1/8, then maybe if they are, let's just put it in cartoon terms, if they report to the office and provide an account of their intentions and goodwill, twice a month, and if they are 1/16, then maybe once a month, something like that. But they could maybe be included with that accountability established. You have to be careful again, because Lenin, for example, could have been just 1/8. Some of that stuff can be potent. Now, and with the Japanese, there would be some formula for how if someone's part Japanese, how much accountability would be required, and if it's someone, if it's people like snorkel blogs kids, they might have to fit into. We might have to provide for particular states that accommodate more mixed kinds that would maybe breed one way or the other into the next generation, then sort more easily. Or our scientists can find that we can handle a few dozen, a few hundred, whatever number of half Asians without great harm over the long haul. I think that's something that scientists can largely handle. Maybe not perfectly, but they can get a good grip on it. Anyway, so that's kind of how I'm thinking about it. And again, I was eager for the fact to include then you'll have a big mouth. Saigon Green, I suppose. Who's Saigon Green? I think that, both for the fact that I want to begin to grapple with the reality of degrees of admixture and consider ways of handling it. And also, I want to balance, particularly the East Asians, as allies in our cause. But they also have a long history of being not only the intelligent and not only can they be ethnocentric, but they tend to be wise to Christianity, seeing it as the kind of imperialist imposition that it is. Okay, so I wanted to go to the next thing that I might have said too big a mouth for being an American, maybe. Snorkelborg, I want to call him Borg because it was Swedish. Snorkelborg, and I say this in part because I'm really happy to talk with this guy. I think he's brilliant, and I definitely want him to continue on in participation. I know that Per is eager to talk to him as well, but there's a difficulty in that he is still identifying as a Christian, and I've had part of my platform is to provide a place for people who, for those of us who reject Christianity as not a religion that's native to us, not a religion that's looking after our biology, which is after all what we're doing here, looking after our biology. Snorkel's argument. Snorkel makes the argument that until we have something to replace it with, he sees the reason to continue to participate with the Christian church. And he backs that argument to some extent, and this is where I became a bit concerned, by saying that the neo-reactionaries recommend this, that we refer to our tradition where we might. Well, first of all, the neo-reactionary, neo and the Dark Enlightenment, the Curtis Yarvin stuff, is a YKW op, which was particularly directed at STEM types, to misdirect them and to have them misunderstand the critique of modernity. And it's another form of the misdirection, of misrepresentation of postmodernity. And so where they're pushing back on into just reconstructing tradition as it were, they're not being sufficiently critical. They're not doing what the postmodern project is supposed to do, which is to look upon traditions, which traditions are helpful in reconstructing are inherited forms, which and or benign, and which and and you could even ask, of course, in the case of Christianity, is this really ours? Now, Christianity, in fact, does not help in its texts to overcome the ravages of modernity's universalism at all, because it's a universal religion. And okay, where I might have conceded that it does provide something of a core in the Ten Commandments, being where JC says, I don't come to destroy them, and if you have already a relatively homogeneous culture, they're basically not the worst rules. But then Jesus does something interesting, and he says, well, even if you think about taking your neighbor's wife, you may as well chop your arm off or pluck your eye out, something like this. Now, I used to take the positive interpretation of that and say, okay, well, Jesus is then saying, even if you think about it, you've done it. And therefore, so in other words, basically you can't perfectly keep the Ten Commandments. So in other words, you have to make practical judgments, which is good. It's a concession to reality and to our imperfect nature, and it's an invitation to deal with reality in a sense. But I think that's being overly kind, and I think actually that this is getting into your head in an egregious way. This universalism, and what it says to the golden rule and its obsequiousness is just, and the fact that you're supposed to put Jesus beyond your family even, and you can't be a Christian if you won't do that. This is all poison, and I will, but again, I don't want to, I'm saying this now to my audience more broadly. How I'm glad in a sense that Snorkel Blog is still a Christian, because this is another thing I've got to figure out a way how to deal with Christians, like especially if they're people like him that I like. I guess he could take the first sort of interpretation, the pragmatic interpretation. There's all sorts of ways to interpret Christianity. Why should you have to? But okay, if you want to enjoy the fellowship of church for a time, I suppose, but you probably should go there with the attitude of, in a sense, well, what the postmodernist does is he'll participate. He will participate in traditions like that, even though it's not really our tradition, with a sense of understanding that really he's seeing in it those practices which were benign, particularly when we were homogeneous people, and probably going there with a sense that he's going to rescue people from this. Ultimately, he's going to rescue people as best he can for a new moral order and liberate them from that red caping of a moral order, because it's an egregious thing that's been done to us, and that false opposition. And again, maybe, I suppose it's quite possible that other people were using the term false opposition or controlled opposition to speak about Christianity before me, but I'm on record as having said it in 2013. Mark says, we trust Jesus, not the easel. Luodong said, why Jesus? Jesus did not exist. That's right, Luodong. Jesus did not exist. and what's more is, not only did he not exist, but if you so much as make the rational case, the Christian Bible says that you are a demon. You are an agent of the devil if you merely say the truth of the fact that this guy didn't exist historically. It's a really bad religion, and it's so much nonsense, and the way it detaches people from logical chains of reasoning. There's so many bad things about it. Again, that's one of the reasons, I really appreciated Kumiko, my Japanese colleague lady. Her critiques of Christianity were brilliant, and it inspires me all the more to connect with that. Maybe the Chinese are probably adept. I mean, they've shown themselves to be quite adept at not yielding to Abrahamic imperialism, while the Southeast Asians are suffering greatly. Many of those nations for the imposition of Islam. We Chinese only believe in tradition. People are history. What's good? I think part of the reason why, put the, oops, that's not it. I'm going to put the link in, not just, I think a few more things I want to add. Before I into a chat with somebody, but I'll put the link here. Okay, then. Let me look at my notes. What else did I want to mention? I talked about Plato and Aristotle and hermeneutics, and that's supposed to turn that around. Liberalism can be, our liberal ways can be ensconced in paradigmatic conservatism, because that's the thing, is that the present state of affairs is pegging our individualism while it's letting our borders run wild, and that's the reverse of what should be. Our borders should be secure, and citizenship should be precious, and our individual liberties, on the other hand, should be relatively free. Now then, a remark on this travesty Putin's travesty and the travesty of response by Zelensky. I automatically know one advantage of that the war has provided is that I can immediately. It's so much more clear to see someone whose opinion that I don't respect right off the bat. First of all, anybody who's making excuses for Putin, it's like, okay, this person's a disease. And then the second kind of person, but what they're always saying, and they don't really. It's the same kind of people who say, "Oh, they're going to call everybody a Nazi." They call everybody. Nah, they're saying that. And they all these people who have Ukrainian flags and they'll even make excuses for the Azov battalion now. They're making it into this grand false either or. It's usually the Putin people who do that. But there's another kind. There is a kind, and it's not quite as it's not quite as singular a thing as the Putinists would have the world believe. The people were just totally on board with Zelensky and his call to war, call even for basically for NATO to get involved, to close the skies, which would be World War III, which is insane, of course. And Greg Johnson is veering a little bit in that direction, kind of like sort of ignoring the kosher-ness and the non-nativeness, the recklessness, the unconcern of that response. Never should have been taken on Russia like this once they got to this point. But it's worse than that. You have Zelensky, of course, who doesn't belong in that position. He's not Ukrainian. Shouldn't be the head of that state whatsoever. And he was put there by, fellow tribesmen, oligarch. But now you have, and he's being egged on in this pugnaciousness, in this war, by, of course, Victoria Nuland, who's the Undersecretary of State, and her husband, Robert Kagan, who was one of the authors of Operation Clean Break. I see Ukraine, another permutation of that. And now you have Blinken, another kosher fellow, going there and supporting the war effort. He was even made the faux pas early on of saying, "Oh yeah, let's supply Poland with some U.S. aircraft to replace them, and they could pass on their surplus." Crazy, YKW harvest that they're looking for. And then we got, so he's going there. But I'm thinking of this picture. You have Blinken, Zelensky, and who's this colored guy, the defense secretary, Lloyd Austin. This is what is supposed to represent America and the West and nationalism. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't at all. And it doesn't represent the interests of the Ukrainian people. they wouldn't be engaged in a hot war like this. The situation probably wouldn't have reached a war. And then you've got you know, the Azovs and the Banderas being incited and used in their instability, in their over the topness for their natural fallacy. And this is the problem with the right. And this is why, why just about anybody, Greg Johnson, in this particular case, there's no platform like this one, like we have here. This is the platform that is going to take our people to our autonomy, to our sovereignty. Mark Smith says, anyone trying to deny the historical Jesus needs to go back to school. Mark, I don't even believe that you're serious. I think they're just a troll, Mark. I really do. Look up, what's his name? What's the guy's name again? The Jesus never existed guy. Oh, on the tip of my tongue. I arranged for a discussion between Bowery and him. I'll think of it later. Mark Smith, talk to me. Well, there's the link. Who are you, Mark Smith? Jesus never existed. What is? I should remember the guy's name automatically. Actually, there's a site called JesusNeverExisted.com. Kenneth Humphreys, that's it. He gives a great explanation about how, through interpolation, you can see that there was no historical figure like that. For one thing, there were historians at the time who were writing about all kinds of people in great detail. But nobody was writing about this guy, Jesus. Nobody. And especially if he was so flamboyant and performing all these miracles, there would have been somebody writing about them. There wasn't. And there wasn't because he didn't exist. And it's probably going to be a troll, but we'll see. Whose show? I guess that was the old Bronx Cheer. These people get a life. That's funny. Okay, so I said the things that were nagging me about. Just the things that were nagging me about that I should have addressed in the talk with Snorkel Blog. About the problems with Plato, that he sort of set forth the Cartesian detachment in response to the shenanigans of the sophists and how they were manipulating praxis, what Aristotle calls praxis, the social world, and to re-engage with praxis and to re-centralize it as the calibration of our worldview is what the postmodern project is about. This is what Vico was doing This is what Heidegger is doing. He's recentralizing praxis as the calibration, the social world. Aristotle says that we're social animals. He adds that politics is the first philosophical concern, because if that's out of whack, then everything else is out of whack and for naught. And the first, the inference that I'm drawing here, then, is that our first order of concern, the social concern, is to establish borders and boundaries for our people. And that is done by something analogous to unionization, which is the opposite of liberalism, because you are in the union. In other words, what's within the union is being conserved, or you're not. And liberalism is basically a function of opening borders and boundaries, or being, or wanting that somehow. Wanting relatively free boundaries within the national union. Yeah, that's a good thing. You don't want some oppressive, aristocratic Norman class like you've had in England. You want the English people to be a union of one. Okay, you can say that a class warfare was used by our enemies, but that's because our enemies were allowed within, or those who thought like our enemies were allowed within, to attack the middle class and to destroy it. Now, Aristotle would say that the middle class is essential to a healthy society. So this is not what we're doing. Let us not be misunderstood. We're not calling ourselves left ethno-nationalism. We're not against private property. We're not against free enterprise, free individual enterprise. Not against wealth generation by those who handle their affairs wisely. And I suppose there could be, there should be unions and guilds which function to preserve and to confer the dignity and respect that workers and craftsmen of certain kinds merit for their integral part in our society. Other groupings as well. So, but this would not be a class difference in the sense of, this would not be a classificatory difference in the sense of antagonistic and somehow below others. They're all basically seen as necessary and a part of our a crucial part of our human ecology. Who's categorical imperative?
Are you stupid or something? But only a dumbass would be giving.
Goodbye. Are you stupid or something? Only a dumbass would be giving. So go somewhere where go listen to someone that you like. Categorical imperative. Now then. I mean, how stupid can you be? And he expects me to entertain him when he begins talking to me that way. Now, who's the stupid one? Okay, then. So structuring our social world is the situation that we're at in the wake and the destruction of modernity and weaponized modernity and weaponized post-modernity, or red-caped post-modernity. Understanding post-modernity as it's supposed to be, as it's supposed to facilitate the reconstruction of our people, of our inherited forms, will set first and foremost socialization, which requires borders and boundaries to our people. And that in this situation, that can be done by unionization. This is a crucial corrective to the ravages of modernity, its Cartesianism, to especially how it's played out through America and the American way, which took Locke's idea of civil individual rights, his response to his resentment of the aristocratic class distinction, and his concept in service of his empirical worldview, which is the empirical half of the Cartesian divide, that classifications were a fiction of the mind and should give way to individual civil rights because we all have the same perceptions, and associations were just something that we put together in our minds. What he wasn't doing is he wasn't observing patterns and the validity of classifying patterns of people and the potential, not only the potential benignness of that, but the necessity of it in order to protect natural kinds in their development from child to maturity against other kinds. The most graphic example, of course, being, how that would be necessary as opposed to universal maturity. That's an original coinage of mine, another one. Running roughshod over important differences in rate of maturation, sublimation, between European peoples, between Asians, between Africans. There's classifying and benign discrimination thereupon for reasons of protection, not for supremacism or exploitation of others, but to protect these patterns and through the slow development, maturation, and the sublimation of different kinds. But Locke's Cartesianism on the empirical side was denying the legitimacy of classification. Okay, it started out. It sounded like a good idea to begin with. You're giving everybody a chance. The ordinary guy a chance. And when America was mostly European, maybe it wasn't so bad. There were problems, of course. But then it became weaponized by the YKW, right, in the form of the Civil Rights Act, 1964, and anti-racism, which is basically a prohibition of classifying and discrimination accordingly, particularly by peoples of European descent. That's a weaponization of modernity. And again, these are things which postmodernity is supposed to correct, is meant to correct. And we're doing here, actually. We're carrying on from Vico, the first critic of Descartes, through Nietzsche, and then Heidegger, and we're carrying on his hermeneutic postmodern turn to where we see the structuring of our praxis, of our praxeology, of our the calibration of our social group as central to our worldview. In contradistinction to the problems, the Cartesian problems of Lockean rights and the pursuit of happiness, the human potential movement. And his dark sides. What should be done about the immigrants currently in Western nations? Well, to begin with, things are so screwed up that we should not. What we're doing is we are beginning with. We're working from the inside out. Is that we should not focus on them to begin with, but rather focus on organizing our people and unionizing our people. That would be my answer. What should be done about them, in a sense, is they would simply be left out of the union. They would not be, they're not European. They can't be part of our union. We're looking to preserve a species, after all. So that's what should be done about them. Citizenship, the matter of citizenship in our union, so to speak, is at the heart of the crux of the matter. Okay. So anyway, they just wouldn't be included to begin with. So we're structuring our social outlook, and we are then beginning to the radical correction of the language game that's being played against the dissident right in this characterology of the left, when they say that, oh, you lefties are just engaged in sheer narrative. You're not dealing with nature. You're not dealing with facts. You're not dealing with truth. Well, we are, but that's these things, these quests, these objectivist quests, these pursuit of facts and the instructions that we must harmonize with nature are feedback. we don't go around as objectivists and saying, this is our identity, the pursuit of pure truth. That's absurd. And yet this is what they've got our people thinking. This is what we're all about. Oh, we're about the truth. We're about facts and God beyond nature and or nature itself. Yeah, it's absurd. We care about our relative interests in the situation, and we have to take in objective facts with that and engage them against and with our relative interests. But that's quite a different thing than the characterology of the left that the dissident writers are talking about, which maintains that the left does not deal with facts, does not deal with reality, does not, that's stupidity. And they're all going, but you'll listen to, what's his name stream? Who's the guy in Finland that Richard Spencer's always talking to? Anyway. Now who's this? Who's the fusionist?
I can show you the other side of the world right quick. You know what they say? Once you go black, you don't go back.
Dude, that's pretty boring. Dr. Ed Dutton. Eddie will, he's going right along with this characterology of the left, and he's going to prescribe how his pursuit of truth. I guess it's somehow supposed to just like correspond with our identity. We're supposed to be all about truth, and here's what's her name, Waxman, this lady from Harvard, this Jewish lady from Harvard, talking to Paul Gottfried, and you'll hear all these dissident writers still saying that Paul Gottfried is really okay. No, he's not. And they're pursuing this. They're promoting this objectivist thing. Their promotion of advocacy of the group advocacy of people has come back to haunt them, especially as they're on top. And so they're all about objectivism now and trying to get European peoples to go along with this right-wing purity spiral about how they're just on top because they're so smart. Well, is intelligence your identity? If somebody from sub-Saharan Africa is smarter than your son, do you say, okay, well, my son is out. My identity is intelligence, so you're replace my son with this sub-Saharan African? It's that ridiculous. We're advocating our people. We're not our relative interests. We're not advocating objective facts. Objective facts are a tool. They are necessary to take into account. But we are, when it comes to abilities, because we advocate our people, we look for he or she who is relatively best for a position of our kind. We don't just say, okay, well, we only want the best from wherever they come, even if they don't really give a damn, they don't care. about our interests, right? It's ridiculous. This what the dissident right is doing is ridiculous. All of them, whether it's academic agent or Greg Johnson or Ed Dutton or Richard Spencer or Rams Paul or even Keith Woods and this Davis, the Australian guy, are susceptible to this. Millennial woes, of course. Millennial woes, you know, ostracized me because I criticized Vivian Veritas for proposing what our terminology should be and how we should look upon the left as the enemy. She and Rachel Haywire, another Jewish lady, were going to tell us what it means to make the dissident right the new trendy. Literally, it's like, we'll show you how to like make it the new youthful thing to identify as right wing. It's clear. This is what they want. They want us to identify as right wing because it's inherently unstable. It corresponds with an objectivist reactionary stance in pursuit of truths to the point. It's a wish to say that's just the way it is. You don't want to be entangled in this kosher rhetoric in praxis. You don't want to have to argue. You want to be a scientist about it, or a god. The problem is, though, the keener you get in your focus and your wish to a narrowing the source of your warrant, whether it's to the king, as Curtis Yarvin might have it, or or God, or then even principles or laws of nature, you are narrowing, ever more so, social accountability, and which puts you limits your correctability, which limits your homeostasis, to your stability. It makes you inherently unstable. That's a big part of the reason why they want us to identify as right wing. By contrast, the left, the depth crime of the left corresponds with unionization and coalition building, social organization, social advocacy. And this, because it's structured, accountability is going to be stable. If there's a problem in unionization in the left, is that it could be too stable, too powerful. It has to be handled with, let's say, by wise proprietors, so that accounts requested are not too common, so that you don't become the Stasi, or that you don't unionize something to the point where, well, I suppose your accountability would not be seen as also something that should be operative with regard to other groups so that you're not, ridiculously ethnocentric to the point where you can't coordinate in a way that's mutually beneficial. None of this, though, this social organization is mutually exclusive to science, truth inquiries of any kind. Matter of fact, again, Aristotle's quite right when he says that if your politics are out of whack, you're not going to. Everything is for naught. I mean, if you are Archimedes and you're trying to work out your marvelous theories, but the politics of the situation are such that you got a Roman centurion coming in there and stabbing you to death. Well, there you go. Whereas if that possibility had been staved off through a better political situation, then Archimedes would have been free to pursue his mathematical and scientific and engineering marvels. Okay, then. So, okay, so we've established that socialization, that social boundaries are of first order priority. And I've maintained that you're not going to have much in the way of human socialization without boundaries, without group boundaries. Otherwise, it sprawls out into universalism, and you become more and more not socialized, but diffused into a common denominator that's more and more animal-like. Again, that's part of the reason, or the danger of modernity and its universalism. It's universal maturity that I was talking about. And this goes to the project that I've been considering since the early to mid 80s. I'm very proud of this. I see all of this holding up. I'm very proud of the way that this platform that I've been setting out and working out holds up. Cross-contextually, and makes sense of things cross-contextually. And it's verifiable. This is not confirmation bias. So you have socialization as we are correcting, we're providing a very much needed correction to difference from Maslow's hierarchy of needs, something like that. The human potential movement, but it's represented by Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where it's the human potential movement and life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, the liberal way. I don't think that Maslow was talking about racial differences, do you? No. But neither was he talking about socialization of any kind as the first order priority. He was saying that food and biological needs, shelter, safety. These were the most fundamental. You're not going to have any of those things if you don't have something of a stable social environment, beginning with your parents and their relations to others. The baby's not going to have food or shelter or anything else if it doesn't have that social framework to begin with. Okay, so we're beginning to correct Maslow's, we can call it epistemological blunder. And from there, he proceeds to do something. Well, let me say that Aristotle was the one who began the discussion of self-actualization. But Aristotle being considerably more wise, I would say, than Maslow, would be talking about, was always thinking in terms of our biological nature, our concern as mammals for relationships, and our biological nature requiring an optimality of need satisfaction. Whereas Maslow was talking about one level of needs being maxed out, then giving way to the next level of the next level. Where he starts out with the what he calls the basic needs of food, safety, shelter, that sort of thing. Okay. Now, let me look again at Maslow's hierarchy. Maslow was, of course, kosher fella. Now, one can say that I'm not being fair to Maslow, that he post hoc tags on a lot of social things. He'll talk about self-actualization corresponding with democratic character and whatnot. But it's not what plays out in the interpretation of people in reality. He's got self-actualization at the top, achieving one's full potential, including creative activities. That's the top of the top human aspiration, self fulfillment. At the bottom, he's got physiological needs: food, water, warmth, rest. Next, he's got safety needs: secure. You get that all full, that box all filled out, quantified. Then you move up to the next one: safety needs, security, safety. That's all quantified. Then you move up when that's all satisfied. Belongingness and love needs: intimate relationship, friends. Never mind. I guess maybe society is kind of belonging, but he's not really too concerned about the broad society. It seems mainly just love needs and intimate relationships and friends. Never mind about your broad patriotic attachments. After that is fulfilled the esteem needs, prestige, feeling of accomplishment. Oh yeah. That's fulfilled, and then you get to self-actualization, achieving one's full potential. You can see how this is the template for a sociopath, for a narcissistic disorder case, and how this pursuit would be liable to rupture social patterns for its selfishness, for its lack of social concern. There's also that quantifying aspect. But also, again, now, this stuff is all playing out in the 60s and in America, and playing into America's Declaration of Independence, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and the pursuing the American dream. We just won the war. And be all you can be and reach your human potential, the human potential movement. Well, I mean, you really feel like a wimp and, a lout as a man if you're not just like taking this opportunity by the throat and really going for it. What is this stuff about caring about people or being sensitive to your folk and caring about what's happening to your women and what? No. You gotta be a great man. And Maslow was I believe the doctoral advisor of Betty Friedan, the maven of the second wave of feminism. And she maintained that that women needed self-actualization. They needed the top of Maslow's hierarchy in order to liberate themselves from the fetters of what she took as her point of departure, Simone de Beauvoir's criticism of the housekeeper's heaven. That is to say that, and it's correspondence to the Aristotelian morality of the golden mean, that is to say, of mediocrity. That's a pretty cutting thing to say about maintaining a balanced way of life. To say that's about mediocrity. You're supposed to, just maximize your greatness, I suppose. Pretty, not pretty toxic, very toxic, very, very wrong. A very big mistake to flout Aristotle in that way, and to propose the pursuit, this largely antisocial pursuit of self-actualization. I guess eventually self-actualization, if it was going to be anything social, of course, it was going to be through Betty Friedan's auspices, advocating women of color. Not certainly not. Anyway, so these are what Aristotle would call high grumbles that they were pursuing, and while the male agenda was not even articulated. I'm the only one who's done it. The men were being sent off to Vietnam to die. So in other words, even their most basic needs were of no concern. Right? They're low grumbles. Just nothing. You can die. You were born with a weenie. That's how much you count. So if any political movement, should have been prioritized, it should have been that men should have been designated, or boys, enough intrinsic value for being here, the culmination of hundreds of thousands of years of evolution, millions, I suppose, not so intrinsically valueless as to be sent to die in a war which demonstrated no clear and imminent danger to us, or an enemy. That there was no clear and imminent danger to us. For what? The tradition, a custom, and the habit of war. We hadn't had enough already. Not even 2 decades out of World War II, or barely 2 decades. Anyway, so you have this vastly incommensurate gender agendas there between the feminists who were being taught to pursue their self-actualization, the top of Maslow's hierarchy, and that anybody who would try to keep them down was a male chauvinist pig. Or question it, or if they were complaining about their situation, they were a wimp. How could they possibly complain that men were so privileged in every way? After all, they got to go and die in Vietnam for nothing. And this is the thing, that neither Friedan nor neither Betty Friedan nor her predecessor, Simone de Beauvoir, were taking into account that the basic needs, that the men were not on top. The men who are on top were not on top strictly and only because they were privileged. There was some of that, but there was also men who were on top because they made it through a harder test and were stronger and showed themselves as worthy. In other words, they weren't fulfilled on the basic levels. They were at a harder road to traverse, to self-actualization, so to speak. Also, tradition reserved some places at the top for men out of respect for that fact that they were through a school of harder knocks and therefore were not as apt to be stupidly liberal. They were more apt to appreciate their situation, their borders, and not giving things up too easily. To not enjoy the mere sport of war, having experienced it. To realize that borders weren't something to flout. Now, and also, not only were Friedan and de Beauvoir not acknowledging, the greater challenges that males were up against on the basic levels of needs, and somewhat valid reasons for where they were on top. But they were also not acknowledging that, at the very bottom, males also occupied the bottom of society. Like I said, in war, Battle of the Somme, almost 1 million men killed in a week. And that on the basic levels and the middle levels, traditionally, for the most part, not at all. It's not always true across the board, but traditionally, the convention is, and usually is, that it's easier, that the social world is easier on women. Not saying that that's bad or good, or it probably even should be that way, but I'm just saying it is, and they weren't acknowledging that. And that there's certain things to enjoy and be grateful for that. Anyway, so you had these unarticulated, incommensurate gender agendas, and so it's only a wonder to me why men didn't go more crazy. The things that women were complaining about while they were being sent to Vietnam to die, and so on. And the hippie stuff represented a bit of leniency, for tacit understanding of this, that things are being a bit hard on men. And correspondingly, that's why the hippie stuff ended almost overnight when the Vietnam draft ended. So, okay, enough of being nice and lenient on guys and their basic level, their being. None of that. Feminine goes into overdrive. Coming back, though, to the correctives to Maslow's hierarchy. Okay, so we have one difference that we're marking from Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So we're making socialization and its unionized boundaries first and foremost as the most fundamental need. And that corresponds really quite well with Aristotle's worldview. Okay, which is good. Secondly, I would propose, and I don't see any need to change it exactly yet, on the middle levels, I would say that we need routine and sacrament, practice of the sacred. And when I say that we need that, what I mean is that we need more public relations, more common understanding that this stuff can be enough. can be almost really can be enough for a good life. Just enjoying fairly normal routine existence, sleep, chores, and occasional, once, twice a week, whatever you want, episodic reverence for what is sacred, what practices are necessary and express that which is vital, has been vital to our forebears, and transcends the bad people among us, transcends the bad aspects of ourselves and the mistakes of ourselves, and allows us to have faith in the value of ourselves and our people to carry on through our children and grandchildren. Now, faith is not a gene, like guest worker would try to say. And it's not something that's like, this hard to grasp and absurd concept. What it is for us is, what it means is that there's this understanding through hermeneutic maintenance of our historical perspective and our systemic breadth, that even when we go through times when the verification of the excellence and worthiness of our pattern is not there, is not evident, that we have enough prior experience and carried over in the rule structure, so to speak, of our narrative, that our faith is sustained with good reason, not to give up and deviate from the pattern. And this is these levels, routine and sacrament. The good thing about it is that it's available to anybody. And you're talking about stabilizing practices here. Not only do you have socializing, the structure of socialization through our unionized boundaries, which structures accountability, not only do you have the recognition that routine can be enough. We're all pretty amazing. We're all really amazing when you think about it. Our station in evolution. And we can ease off people, not just women. It's always been good enough for women for routine to be enough, but for guys too. The routine, and it's not only it can be enough, it's really essential. I mean, you can't break a rule or extrapolate on a rule until you know it. I mean, I dare say you're going to, self-actualization without mastering some of the basic routines, you can translate that into learning things through mentors even. What kind of actualization you can have without that? So now you're beginning to grasp the fact that I'm not telling people not to have self-actualization or not to pursue it or not to want it. That wouldn't be very European, would it? No. But what I'm seeing the need for is to stabilize it, and most of all, to put it in the context of socialization. Because the pursuit of self-actualization, especially for guys who've been deprived their basic needs, who are acting towards self-actualization, having been, on through privation and deprivation, desperation. This is the stuff that's going to make for crazy people, for dictators, for tyrants, for sociopaths, social aberration. And even if they, kind of succeed and are not entirely sociopathic, the implications, the implicative force of their selfish pursuit can, if it's not based with social accountability, is going to be prone to rupture our social patterns, our social group boundaries. Because those, in the story that's being told of the human potential movement, those are not all that important. What's really important is your self-fulfillment. The rest of the world be damned. So all of this would be ensconced, these motives, which I'm saying, I think that's pretty, these are four things that I think that I'm pretty sure that most Europeans would say, yeah, more or less, that's the stuff of a good life. But it would not be linear. This would be a circulating process where you would be going back to the basic biological needs, because socialization, of course, corresponds with Dasein, their being, and Mitdasein. And yes, it's a part of that is to be able to sleep. If we are able to sleep, that means that we're basically trusting other people to allow us to do that and to be on guard while we're asleep. It's a social thing when you think about it. Dasein, their being. Mitdasein, being amidst your people. Socialization. So socialization, being, their being, Dasein, Mitdasein, and routine and sacrament. These are the basic levels. And I think that tradition would provide a segue from routine to sacrament. The postmodern turn would allow us to negotiate, to participate in tradition without the pangs of self-loathing for the appearance of conformity, but also the knowledge that we have a perspective that allows us to assess whether a tradition is backwards and not serving us, not serving our inherited forms, or it's alien, as in the case of Christianity, not really our tradition at all, but an affectation. Or whether, in fact, we should transform that and engage in new practices. For the most part, though, I mean, traditions are traditions for a reason, because they've worked. So there'll be more tradition than modernist transformation. That we will, of course, be able to assess the good of modernity. It's just that it's going to have that control variable in our social accountability. It's not just going to be just a haphazard experiment gone wild like we have today. Was it Conops was saying made some stupid objection that oh, never mind. But these needs, these requirements, stabilized in that way. The use and the enjoyment of life, stabilized in that way. Then the pursuit of self-actualization, it will be understood that you're not doing this, that what you're doing, yes, it may serve you, you may enjoy it, but it's also going to be something that corresponds with the best interests of the rest of your people as well. You're going to be accountable for that. And that's your audience, isn't it? If you want them to, that's what makes it meaningful, isn't it? I mean, if you want people to understand and appreciate what excellent things you've done. You're doing it for yourself, for your emergence? I don't think so. Now, coming back to the forms of Plato, and this is back and forth between Plato and Aristotle. The forms detached and the forms, as a detached ideal and the teleological end of a physical creature. Heidegger did see a formal guidance inherent in the end of our emergent teleology. So it's coming back to the forms in a sense, as guidance, as something that you hold fast to as an ideal. And I think that it was Unamuno, the Basque philosopher. Who was saying something similar and profound in saying that these perfect ends that we fix as guidance serve like the rocks of a jetty and the vicissitudes of chance crash like waves, harmlessly against that direction, that coherent towards the ideal. Just a thought. That might be. I don't think it's too rigid. I'm just take it in context. Okay. So with that, Unamuno's good, the Basque philosophers, good words. I'll put the link out one more time. If nobody joins me, I will conclude having said what I need to say in correction of the last stream with Snorkel Blog, and he's a really smart guy. I very much look forward to talking to him more. And I can't wait till Per comes on to speak with him, and Mirth Turn. Oh yeah. So anyway, and then we talk about ways that the gender, once the borders are set, then I think that it'll be a lot easier to iron out the conflicts, the incommensurate gender agendas. Since I've talked about it, there could be more ease on men for the basic boys and men for their basic levels, so they don't go as crazy in pursuit of self-actualization, and there could be a little bit more, let's say, challenge to women if they want to pursue actualization that doesn't have so much to do with direct social relational concerns, but more personal, to make sure that they're not too liberal when they go for the farther reaches. And we talk about, the games that they can play, that the problematic practices of liberal feminism, what they can play with men. It's like even well-meaning men could be put in the wrong no matter what they do. They can be a wimp or a pig no matter what they do. If you treat her if you treat her as one of the boys, and you respect her independence, then you are a classic male chauvinist pig who's sees the whole world through your chauvinist male point of view, not respecting the special quality for gender. See the Maslow there waiting for me. On the other hand, if you do treat her with deference for the special quality of a gender, then you can be construed as a wimp, a condescending wimp who does not respect her independence and her strength. So you can be you can be in a situation where you can't win. The Mossad. Who's the Mossad? Hello? I'll assume the Mossad is having a little joke there. I don't know why these people don't get a life. Go somewhere else. Yeah, so I mean, it's got to drive a lot of guys crazy when they really don't have a lot of support, if any, on the way up, and they achieve anyway despite that, and they're treated by feminists as if they've only gotten to the top because they're privileged, when really it's been quite the opposite. They've gotten to the top because they're fairly desperate and have been deprived. In some cases, again, not always. Some guys are lucky. Other guys are just, talented and do have some support along the way. But other guys are like really achieving despite really nasty treatment along the way and not a lot of help. All these weird people are. Hello? Hello?
Hello.
Oh, hi, Claire.
Hi, Daniel.
So you're a frog now.
Just
That's
found
how you fooled me.
Yes. I had to be a little bit creative about it. So,
Well, what are you doing up this time of? You must be really concerned to track me down here at 3. It's 2:20 in the morning there in England.
oh my God, yes, of course it is. Well, the thing is, I kind of, I got a little tired. I dozed off, and now I'm bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. But I should be going to bed soon again. Really. Did you? Has anything happened recently? I don't know if I've kept track on everything else. The latest
Oh,
developments as
I
far
did
as
have.
you're concerned.
Well, I did pop onto Aaron Amahood's stream. Was it yesterday? The day before yesterday? The day before yesterday. And I thought that was productive. For some reason, I'm often able to agree with him about some things, not important, not other things. He
Mhm.
believes that religion comes from God. I believe that it's made between people. But we were able to agree that it's not a good idea for Zelensky to be heading the Ukrainian state, and he is concerned, as I think that he should be, that this is going to cause the Jews to be blamed for his calls to war against Russia, which never should have been the way in this case. That was it's been a reckless thing for him to do. Well, that's the understatement of the century, and that he would call for NATO to shut down the sky over Ukraine is basically calling for World War III. So Aaron agreed with me that maybe Zelensky is not the appropriate person to be heading the Ukrainian state.
Well,
And
apparently he was put there.
yeah,
He was specially chosen, for all kinds of things, and they rigged the election with the help of Google, repressing everybody, other candidates, so they wouldn't get in. And he is really the puppet of the Americans rather
not
than.
not the well. Wait, he had his main help was this Jewish oligarch. I forget the guy's name offhand, who owned the media station that he was acting for. His name was? What was his name?
I don't know, but I
I'll
mean, I
tell you.
knew that.
I'll tell you in a
I
second.
knew,
I'll bring it up.
yeah, but anyway, the whole
Well, the
situation there with.
Americans. You mean Blinken,
Yeah, Victoria Newland,
Victoria Newland, her husband
Wilcox.
Kagan,
Mm.
and then there's this news coming out of Biden for years being a guy who's quick to sell Operation Clean Break or override peace negotiations for the sake of Operation Clean Break effectively, which is Robert Kagan's thing. He was one of the authors.
Mm. But if you can think of anything, well, I mean, what's happened to the Ukrainians has been, truly terrible. I bet, most of them are just, begging Zelensky to just give the Russians whatever they want. And I mean, you hear terrible stories about the mercenaries actually killing, well, any civilian, whatever they're, because they're going to blame it on the Russians. They're going
I can imagine the Chechens being particularly ruthless.
And the plan, I mean, they would be mercenaries, and they're kind of, well, there has been an attempt to recruit mercenaries and actually wanting them to come from the British Army, though not officially from the British Army.
Just as the case is with Zelensky, who's not Ukrainian, these mercenaries who are not closely related are going to be less caring and more ruthless as well, or more reckless as well with their ethnic genetic interests. The guy's name was Ihor Kolomoisky.
Okay, it means nothing to me, but
he's a billionaire, Jewish billionaire media mogul who ran the corporation that Zelensky worked for, and basically he was the one responsible for putting Zelensky into the presidency. I think that's what you call it, of Ukraine.
Yeah, I mean, for every Jew that gets involved, you can almost hear the other Jews saying, "Stop it! Don't do it! They're just going to blame us when it all goes wrong. So don't do it for personal glory because it'll all turn to shit."
Well, maybe, but he's there, and
and the thing is, he's probably completely isolated, and I haven't actually watched a single one of his broadcasts to Parliament.
I'm not interested in what he has to say. I can't. It just disgusts me. And anytime I see when I see another Twitter channel that promotes him as like a great guy or a hero, I just leave. I'm not interested at all in anybody who thinks that he's a worthy leader.
Unfortunately, though, the females I know seem to support him. They swallow the story lock, stock, and barrel, and
I'm not really sure why that is. I think it's weird.
They can't be bothered to learn the history of Ukraine or anything like that. I mean, there'd be quite a few people, men, young, attractive young men, designed to get the attention of females like Macron and Guaido, and I think Zelensky's one of them. And there's a Hungarian.
You think Zelensky's handsome? Come on, he's not.
Well,
handsome.
not handsome, but kind of okay, considered okay by women who would find the other candidate, instantly repulsive.
Well, they just find anybody power. They consider any guy with power to be attractive. Pretty much.
Well, for New Labour in Britain, Gordon Brown, when he was younger, was quite a looker, and Tony Blair, I mean, in contrast to John Major, there was a marked difference, and they actually wrote articles in the BBC about how women voted New Labour in, and it couldn't have been done without the women. And and then Blair had his,
well, they did the same thing with Clinton.
All women short.
They voted for Clinton too.
Yeah,
And
and I'm afraid you are all being manipulated, men and women, and the thing about the Ukrainians is it's actually quite sad because all the women have gone and these Ukrainian men have lost their women, but these women are not going
well,
to
it
go
kind of
back.
it kind of does correspond with what I'm saying, that this thing about men being considered expendable. They're basically not having any value because Zelensky won't even let them leave the country. They have to stay there and fight this basically losing war or
Yeah.
totally destructive war from the start. And he should never have called for war at all. He should have. This guy. Yeah, I mean,
Well, he was a comedian, for God's sakes, Well, why would you trust anybody like that? And the thing is, really, you shouldn't elect anyone who's a leader who's not a married father of adult children. That used to be the rule, because you
there
know
could be something to that. That certainly could help. Yeah.
but that used to be the rule before. Not only did he have, I mean, just like Heath was terrible and he was a bachelor, and now there are all kinds of stories about being some kind of pervert. It's too late now. And then, it's not enough that they're married without children because it's like, well, maybe you can't control your children. If you can't control your children, how can you control the country? And therefore, they have to be parents of grown-up children who have not got themselves into
Well, I take it a
trouble
step
or
further.
somehow credit to their
You've got to be
parents.
Ukrainian to head the Ukrainian state,
Yeah, but I'm saying,
and he's
this
not.
is how
So,
any country ought to choose their leader. So they
um,
could never be some gay
yeah,
guy,
maybe, I don't know. I'm not convinced of that. I think that it probably helps that they be coming from normal relationships with
Yeah.
children. But I wouldn't make that an absolute requirement.
No, I mean, I wouldn't either, but if there's nobody else around, but you sort of think you're asking for trouble if you break those rules. And that used to be the rule that operated before all this nonsense.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
Vince says
I guess you'd
now,
have more concern for that would give him one more reason not to be so reckless with the lives of people. I suppose he's looking at his own kids and doesn't want them to die either. So yeah, there's some sense to that. Um, yeah, I mean, just though this war is totally
it's
insane.
a pity of it, and of course, Ukraine is a breadbasket of Europe, and it's going to upset quite a few food supplies, like sunflower oil and grain, and
Yeah.
the whole thing is crazy. I mean, it's
Well, Putin,
astonishing
Putin,
that European leaders would have allowed it. I mean, if I
Putin's
were
nuts.
Boris, I would just lead the
Yeah,
Exodus out of NATO.
nobody should have sent them weapons. They should have told Zelensky, come here, son. They say he has a home in Florida. Go there, and Putin, you can have the Donbass. You can even have Mariupol and Crimea, but we're going to keep Odessa for our seaport for Ukraine and the major cities, and let's be done with this.
Yeah, and NATO countries in Europe are still, sending them weapons, or Germany's kind of holding back, were they? They said they'd send weapons, and it hadn't arrived, and there were, while Zelensky's saying, "Send us all your weapons, we need all
Well,
your weapons."
who cares? It's only European people who are dying. It's only the men who create some of the most beautiful women in the world. So create some of the most beautiful white women in the world. So who cares if they die, right? They're only Europeans.
Well,
And
I
the same,
care.
and the same
I
with
mean, I won't care because I
same with the
live in Europe.
Russians. Same with the Russians. Let them die too, right? I mean, who cares?
Well, the Russians have to do what they do. Well, I mean, the Russians
No,
might as well clean up since they were forced into the situation.
they were not forced into the situation. You see this?
The
I'm
red
gonna, I'm gonna, I'm
lines
gonna
and all that.
absolutely disagree with you, Claire. Putin did not have to do this. What he's doing is evil. I have no respect for him.
Why? He already said, don't cross my red lines," and this was obvious
Well,
provocation.
who the fuck is he to say don't cross my red line? It's just not.
Because
It's not for him to
Cuban
say.
Missile Crisis.
You
Come
know,
on,
like,
Cuban
what,
Missile Crisis.
I mean,
Those were your
the argument is that the missiles could arrive a few minutes sooner if they're stationed. So
It's a Monroe doctrine. You had a
make an
Monroe
arrangement that there's no
doctrine.
missiles there. Huh?
No, you guys had the Monroe Doctrine since what, 1850, 30, 54, was it? The Monroe Doctrine.
It doesn't matter. This does not
Well,
give.
okay, it doesn't matter
No,
because
it doesn't give. It doesn't give Putin an excuse to do this. It doesn't have his.
Why not? Why not? He
because Ukraine is a sovereign nation. He doesn't.
It's not a sovereign nation. It's Russia's backyard.
Of course, it's a sovereign nation, and
Nonsense.
absolutely.
Is as sovereign as Ireland,
Well,
if it
Claire,
threatens British interests.
you know what? You say this, Claire, because you're only proving the point that you're not European. You don't care about us.
I'm sure there are plenty of.
Anybody who defends anybody would defend Putin in this situation from
Plenty of
European
Americans
perspective would be called insane. No good person would defend.
Well, there are lots of no good Americans.
Absolutely,
but
no good person would, and none of them. Nobody. This is a perfect test for anybody. Anybody who defends Putin in this situation, their opinion is shit.
Oh,
he's going there. He's going to destroy. He's murdering people, men, women, and children.
It's war. What do you expect?
What do you mean it's war? Oh, you don't even say. You don't even say it in. You're just playing devil's advocate. You don't even have a serious tone of voice. You don't even take it.
Well, I'm not going to get emotional all over again.
No, but it's war. I mean, you're talking about the worst thing in the world.
It is the worst thing, and I'm saying it could.
And you didn't have to do it.
World War III.
If the worst he should have done is
then you'll be affected.
You say, okay,
you're American.
you people are causing trouble in Donbass. We're going to take over those march of fucking Russian troops into those two provinces, and that's it. You've already got the Crimea, and be done with it.
There was already stuff going on in those regions. They were being.
He didn't march. He had his troops in the border. If he was so damn concerned, then just take that over. And
I don't know why.
Nobody would have. Nobody was.
Nobody.
If he just done that, there probably wouldn't even be a war.
Plenty of respected American commentators.
No, I don't respect. There's not one of them to be respected.
Blindly patriotic.
No. There's no who's a respected American commentator who would defend.
Paul Craig Roberts.
Yeah, well, I don't respect his opinion on this. Sorry, he's always been a Russian shill.
Well, because he's a self-hating American, right? He
probably, yeah.
Yes,
I might agree with you about.
Disgusted with his own country.
That's the reason. That's the reason why. That's the reason why a lot of people are falling for Putin's crap, because they're so. I understand this. I mean, you don't see me. No, wait. Let me finish. No. Well, hold on a second. America is such a hell for any white person who cares about themselves and white people that you can almost understand them over sympathizing with Russia, but it's still, they're not really understanding the situation, and they're not that this is not that Putin is not on our side at all.
We don't even. Okay, nobody's thinking that Putin's on anybody else's side other than his own side. But what we can sympathize with is that it makes sense. What he is doing makes sense for Russians, for the Russian national interest. And so we
it makes sense, but it does not make good sense, because he's created such animus that won't go away for maybe forever. He didn't have to do this. He did not have to do this.
That's what you say, but even
no, it's a fact. He didn't have to do this. Okay, what's the? I mean,
I mean, obviously, Russia has been
already on his
completely
borders are there's Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia,
yeah, and
already
that
NATO
was the
countries on
red
his
line, and it
borders.
was crossed, and you want to
Oh
do it
yeah, but
again?
well, he's nobody to be asserting a red line like that. That if you cross it, that he's going to go in and start
Well,
murdering
that's how
men,
you
women, and
do it.
children. Well, no, it's
Yes,
not. No, it's not.
stop or I'll
When you have a
shoot.
stupid
Stop or I'll
religion like
shoot.
he does, maybe
You
when you're the
if
best
he's
when you have the
Putin
kind of friends that
stupid,
he does, this is a stupid thing that he's done.
well, we'll see who wins, but maybe nobody wins
He's not
if World War Three
he's not
breaks out.
winning. He won't win in any worthwhile sense.
Well, it's a European, so Western Europeans who will lose
he's
out.
taken a nation of people who were basically disposed. If you talk to the Ukrainians, they were supposed to say, "Yeah, we're closely related to the Russians. We like the Russians. A lot of our people live in Russia. We don't want to fight with them. A lot of our people
You're
speak
sensible
both languages. So,
Ukrainians.
and that's the way it would have been. They didn't want to fight with the Russians."
Yeah, okay,
and,
but somehow
and
or other,
he's gone in there and because of the instigation of the kosher folks and
you want to blame
who
Jews
manipulate
now?
because they are to blame and they're manipulating a bunch of crazy Azovs and Bandera people to go over the top and this is what you've got.
Well, I don't. You don't seem to care about Russia's red lines as if it doesn't matter because you're not Russian. Is that why
Oh,
you say?
I do care about the red lines, but the red lines didn't have, who,
There's been no buffer state. There used to be the Eastern
where
Bloc and the Warsaw Pact, and
it
now
didn't.
Russia is
This is all you ever hear,
encircled,
and
and
it's like,
you expect
first
the
of all,
Russians
Ukraine's
to
not
be
a
stuck together.
first of all, Ukraine is not a NATO nation. Ukraine is not a NATO nation.
Yeah,
They
it's
didn't do
not,
it.
but it's been treated as if it were a NATO
Oh,
nation.
yeah,
And
Putin doesn't
this
need
is
these
a great
excuses. He doesn't get
danger.
these excuses. Well, we'll just Claire, we'll just disagree, and that's all. Because I see Putin as having no excuse. What he's done is evil, and I wish him the worst.
Well, I think the Americans are eviler.
Well, it's not the Americans. It's Zog, and it's Zog in connection with right wingers that they manipulate.
Well, the
Or,
neocons.
well, those are kosher folks. It's them in tandem with right wingers who take the payoff, and neoliberals and liberals. So it's not exactly Americans. Eviler, not than this. They're evil enough. Yeah.
I can't see how you are defending it. It's just that the European
Defending
leaders
what?
are
Defending what?
stupid enough to do
Wait a minute.
things
Who am I defending? I'm defending. I'm not defending Zog.
you're defending American foreign policy.
No, I'm not.
I mean, you caused it. You lot caused it.
No, I didn't.
It's just that
I
the
did
stupid
not.
Europeans
No, I
are
did
dumb enough to go
not.
along with it.
I did not. What I said, in fact, is that when the stupidity of when things didn't work out because Putin was being provoked by Victoria Nuland and her Azov battalions, what should have happened is that the first instance that Putin went over the top, they should have gotten Zelensky out of there, allow Putin to install his Lukashenko-like regime like he did in Belarus, and then fight over the long haul to retake the nation and the presidency for a true Ukrainian representative and on behalf of the Ukrainian people, but not a direct hot war like this. That's what I say. Because I've been to Belarus, and that's another puppet for Russia, Lukashenko, and if you cross him, if his tyranny, you can get into big trouble. But as long as you don't, it's at least your Belarusian people are surviving intact. And there are bad things coming from the West if you don't protect your borders. So I'm not defending the West at all. I mean, Mearsheimer's defending the West. Joel
Well, actually,
Joel
Mearsheimer
Calkin is
saying he's a
defending the
student.
West.
He's actually saying
Timothy
it's
Snyder is defending the West, but not me.
Well, Mearsheimer is not approving of this at all. I mean,
No,
he's actually been saying, we done wrong. What do you expect?
He's saying that the West has done wrong, but he's saying, but what he wants in the long run is liberal democracy. What he means by that is extending the franchise indefinitely, opening the borders if necessary. He doesn't care about European peoples. He's not European.
Are you talking about? Sorry, he wants more immigration. Is that what you're saying?
He just doesn't care.
But has he said he wants more immigration?
Yes, in fact, he did say that. He said that Europe suffers from low population growth, and they're going to have immigrants. He said that, which is stupid.
Well, it's up to the Europeans to say, well, we have low population. What's the obvious thing to do, without upsetting the rest of the populace, which is very simple as far as I'm concerned. You start supporting the institution of marriage. You say things
and you deploy robots otherwise too. Yeah.
Well, that's actually going to be hugely expensive and not necessary. I know the Japanese are doing that.
Yeah. And where did they?
It's actually not a good idea.
And where did they? And who bought the robots there? It was Americans.
Well, people just like the sci-fi idea of robots doing everything, particularly that of sex bots, just. And they would be slaves whose feelings you don't have to consider.
So men don't have to go to Thailand anymore?
Well, I mean, it will actually be dysgenic. Eventually, when people wise up, they will ban these things. Because once upon a time, masturbation was considered to be a sin. In fact, Jews still.
No, I disagree with it. I think that masturbation is a good thing. I think it's better than using than experimenting on other people and using other people. This is like freeing your mind to experiment. And then think about things before you get into trouble.
Yes. I mean, it's sort of something that everybody has done at one time in their life. But if you think of the extreme form of that will serve me for the rest of my life. Imagine if everybody thought that. I mean, there's a theoretical danger that Kant and this principle of universalizability. So if everybody just did that and never had sex with anybody and never
no, I don't. But it's not mutual.
Then the whole world would die. I mean that's the Kantian principle of universalizability. So
I think the more interesting problem is what about all these guys going to Thailand and the Philippines and whatnot? And they're such pigs. I don't see how they're so comfortable with themselves. I can't relate to that. They're just like, oh yes, no, the white guys that go there.
Well, because it's
cheap. It's cheap there and it's easy, but yeah, and it's beautiful and all, but still, to just help yourself and indulge in woman, Thai woman after Thai woman. I don't know how they're comfortable.
It's just degrading for both sides, and ultimately, free love degrades the consumer of free love. And
how must the Thai guys? They must bother them.
Well, they turn to women. I mean, Lady Boys is a Thai product.
Oh,
right?
Yeah, very nice. Ugh. I saw this one guy who was actually talking about this, one weightlifter guy. He went there. I was watching an interview with him. He says like, "Oh yeah, and I got 3 steady girlfriends, one American and 2 Thai mothers, and then I have other Thai women that I intermix, and then some lady boys too." The guy is so weird. He's saying how he views these lady boys as, oh yeah, they're let me tell you, they're better at being women than women because they understand men.
Well, I mean that would be true
Oh
because
God!
no, well, my mother has
Even
said,
if it is true, I mean, how horny can you
yeah,
get?
well, okay, I'm not even talking about being horny, but it's the way they do the mannerisms. It's like women could probably take a few pages out of their book about how they do it, and the
Jesus.
fluttering of the eyelashes, the demure looks, and all
Well,
that
that's
kind
your
of thing.
culture.
I mean, the thing is, you watch them and you think, wow,
Do you have lady boys in Malaysia?
no, I saw the Ladyboy show in Thailand. And yeah, I mean, the goings on after the show, they come out and greet all the guests, and the guests would, the audience, it was sort of really horrible. They'd go up to them and, squeeze their boob and shit like that.
I
Yeah,
find it.
I felt sorry for them.
I find
I
it
guess you
sad.
do it in order
I
to
find it
earn a
tragic. Very
crust.
sad. Very sad to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's sad for, we think it's free and easy, but I guess a lot of Thai women have to put up with a lot of infidelity, and so and
Well, they shouldn't.
and I think Malaysia, which is its neighbour, are more fortunate, even though a lot of things are not allowed. It keeps their society a bit more orderly.
Is Malaysia Islamic?
Yes, it's officially a Muslim country. I come from there.
That's why you're Islamic. Huh?
Well, no, I'm not Islamic. I'm saying it's fine. I mean, I didn't feel I was oppressed or anything. Of course, there are people who complain, but it's actually a pretty liberal Muslim country.
How did your family's Chinese? How did they wind up in Malaysia?
What?
Your family's Chinese. How did they wind up in
Yes.
Malaysia?
Yes.
How did they wind up in Malaysia?
Well, the British really, I mean, things were bad in China around last century, and my grandfather got out and he arrived on a British ship because the British were basically moving people around as they would, running their global empire. They moved a lot of Chinese and Indians to Malaya, as it then was. Because the locals wouldn't work because, well, when you're in your own country, you don't see why you have to work so hard. Even though the British want you to country, you don't see why you have to work so hard. So, well, I mean, basically...
Who's the Ukrainian lady here? Is that I can't see? Is it a picture of a colored woman? What is that?
It is a picture of a naked woman.
So probably I should just.
I think so.
Kick them. Stephen St. James. Who does Daniel have positive things to say about? He's been asking me. He thinks that he's going to catch me about this. Well, for one, I like Per Norden, who was a recent guest, and I liked Snorkel Blog, of course. There's other people who I like, who I think that are.
You've said nice things about me in your time.
There's some nice things about you, Claire, but basically, I can't be bothered.
Well, I'm
Stephen St. James. He spent a year in Thailand. Stephen St. James says Claire is Chinese from an Islamic state and shockingly promoted CCP communism with Islamic dressing. Stephen St. James is always speaking in ironic tones. It's hard to know when he's serious.
Oh, I think he's better when he posts in the chat. If you ever watch his streams, it's like, what is it all about?
Well, that's what I mean. It's hard.
It's him talking to his dog.
He's so, and he's so everything's in such an ironic tone. You don't know what he's serious about and what's not. I think that he means to do that, but I just
I think he does.
Sometimes I don't know where he's coming from.
I did a stream today complaining about the catastrophic loss of Western masculinity, and this is something that academic agent said himself. When he was being disarmingly honest, he was saying that born that at the time I was, I couch everything in postmodern irony. So
Well, I don't really agree with that. I think that the catastrophe is the loss is that women not acting feminine enough, women not being women.
yeah, but if
not-
men acted masculine, the women would still soon start acting feminine. It's just that one
no,
sex
no.
has to do the
Yeah,
right
no,
thing, and
no.
the other
The
one
borders,
does
the borders,
not.
the borders have to be closed. You don't try to
Yeah,
out
no,
macho
you okay,
Claire.
obviously,
Claire, you don't try to
we
out
don't have to talk
you don't
about
try
that
to
now.
out
I do not
macho
want to talk
you
about
don't
that.
try to out macho black. So just make a foolish wigger out of yourself.
No,
and
no,
and,
I'm
and you
not
and
saying
you won't be true to the natural form of your European masculinity because we have a
no,
different
I'm
we
not
have a different
saying
rate of maturity and a different level of sublimation. We're not like you don't just like
you
tr-
misunderstand me, Daniel. I'm
yeah.
not saying to act in a way that is going to outclass, black men, with their swagger and all that. No, I'm saying masculinity is best expressed by um, show by
I just don't agree with this take.
being prepared to defend principles. That's what I'm saying. Masculinity ought to be. It's not about having six
Well,
packs
the
and
principle that has to be made, that has to be defended is the borders and the boundaries.
I know.
Or
Okay, this is what you think ought to be defended, and
no, that's
actually,
what I
I
think. That's
agree.
what I know. That's what
All
I
right,
know.
I actually
That
I
has to be
agree with
done.
you.
That's what it means to man up at this point.
I
'Cause
agree with you.
all
I
else is
agree with you.
futility otherwise.
Yes. So you have to defend your territory. That's your role
Not
as
just territory.
men.
Well, the union to begin with. The territory, the land territory is a bit too politically imbued and obstructed with bureaucracy at this point. That's too much to take on. It's too tangled. So, but the sense of unionization, not that is the border that has to be established, and that's where a citizenship of sorts can begin.
Well, you need
Or
to define terms. You need to define
no,
these things.
well, not so much. Just that you have to have basically European genetics to be in this union. There's a few other
I'm just
things.
making a general point that men are expected to defend their women and their territory. So, I mean, I don't
Well,
see why you would want to disagree with that.
defend their women and their territory. Well, I mean, uh,
Property,
we defend
children.
everybody. We defend everybody in the union. I mean, that's what it's about.
Well, I'm just saying that the role of the men can usually be generally accepted as being a defender or provider or a fighter. But anyway, that's their role, and it's you don't expect women to do those things, right? It's naturally the
No,
role of men.
not exactly. Usually, the role of men. Yeah, some women like to get up there and fight too, but that's not the standard. No, but it's unless the borders are established, it's like I don't know. It's like
You have to agree on the
it's like trying to
principle.
mop a floor while the hose is being run onto it.
Yes, yes, I know, which is why you have to you have to point to the problem. You have to state what the problem is, and
Well,
then when people agree about
I
what the
have.
problem is, yes, I know
If people listen to the show, they'll see that I've
yeah, but people might
diagnosed and
not
I've
agree with
articulated
you.
the show.
Okay, they don't agree with you about the
No, they
problem.
do agree
They
with
don't agree
they
with
do
me
agree
about
with
the
me.
problem
They're not allowed to hear me. They do agree with they would agree with me. They're between shadow banning and these suckers on the dissident right who are getting everything wrong fundamentally. who
Yeah, but they
don't
can't
like me.
defend the principle.
Huh?
Because look, in this
What?
society, can I just explain?
Wait,
It'll
no. What?
become
What do you say? What about principle? Who doesn't defend principle?
well, men don't. Western men don't defend principles, do they? I mean, they can't even defend, even talk about the principle of defending the national interest. I mean, I can't even get
We can't. We
nationalists to
can't
agree with me.
because the YKW control the media and the courts and everything else, and they won't. They
Oh,
won't.
that's silly. I mean, you can
That's not
still.
silly. It's not silly. That's absolutely the case.
Well, I get to say that. I get to say that.
We.
Nationalism should
You can
be
say it's
supplemented in
silly,
national
but
interest.
it's wrong. But it's wrong. Our people obviously have been prohibited from defending themselves.
No, because they're
They'll
dumb.
be called.
They always have to. They have to say
They'll be called.
stupid,
They'll be called
anti-Semitic, racist
Claire.
things, and
Claire.
then they get
Claire.
hammered.
You're being ridiculous. It's obvious that they can't. It's all sorts of
Yeah,
all
because
sorts of laws in the United
they
States, the
have to
Civil Rights Act.
frame everything
No,
in
no, 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 no,
anti-Semitic and racist
no,
terms.
Claire. No, Claire.
Well, it's true. I get to say what I want, more or less.
Not here. Not if it's bullshit. You don't get to say it here.
I'm saying, generally
And,
speaking,
like
I'm
Claire,
not censored.
no, they cannot defend their race. They cannot classify and defend their people. It's prohibited. Whether it's couched in terms of civil rights or anti-racism, they can't do it.
So you have to frame it in a different way.
No, I don't have to frame it into. I have to.
Okay, well, it's your
I
point
have
of
to
view. You don't want to
explain.
do it.
I have to
Fair
explain,
enough.
which I have, that this what's happening is a total farce and a
And you can't do
weaponization
anything
of modernity. I am doing something about it.
What are you doing?
It's a
You're just
weaponization
saying,
of modernity. I've explained this. I've explained it.
yeah, but
It
you
doesn't
can't
matter. I
say
know.
it in a
We already know
sentence.
that,
You
Claire. We
can't
already know
say
that
it
you,
in a sentence.
Claire. We already know that you're impervious. I mean, you can explain things perfectly to you.
You're the one who's impervious.
No, I'm not. Not impervious, and have explained how everybody knows how it's literally illegal to defend our people. I mean, really, I'm being as explicit about it as possible because I understand the situation. I understand what's being done well enough so that I can explain it in a way that shows that we are merely trying to defend ourselves, that we don't aim to do harm to other people, to exploit, kill, and certainly not genocide other people. But I do understand and I do explain how it is that we are not able, even if, first of all, our people are being confused. They're being red caped to fight against the very underlying principles, if you want to call them principles, and rule structures that we require. Then if they can understand it, they can begin to gather consensus and unionize accordingly and form coalitions. So I should have known better than to invite Claire. It's like, basically, Claire, go back and listen to the beginning of the show. It answers your questions. Academic Agent played one of my videos in his show tonight. I'm hot property. I saw that. Stephen St. James. I don't want to dislike you, but you're wrong. You were wrong in what you said about Paul Gottfried not being the nemesis of white people. This is a mischaracterization. He does very well occupy a position which is promoting the perspective and the framework that the dissident writers are falling into. in alter casting as right wingers, dissident writers, alternative writers, paleocons, in reaction to a characterology of the left. And you can see that across the board. It should be clear. It doesn't mean that he might very well think that he's doing. He might not be fully aware, fully conscious of what he's doing, but he's doing it. And whether he's like, I'm not saying that he's the sole guy or, the puppet master of puppet masters. But on the other hand, he's the one who coined the term paleoconservatism. Paleoconservatism, which he derived from Frank Meyer, the fusionist. Paleoconservatism, which Pat Buchanan subscribed to, which Sam Francis subscribed to. Then when Sam Francis died, and Joe Sober, when Sam Francis died, then he became kind of a chaperone of Richard Spencer, and kind of worked with him a bit on retooling paleoconservatism into the alternative right to fashion it as a new movement for young white kids, to get them to continue to identify as right wing for reasons I've explained, not good reasons for white people. Gottfried tidied himself up for Amy Wax today. Yeah. Amy Wax, yeah. I was talking about her earlier. Greg Johnson thinks she's all right, too. Maybe Greg Johnson wishes that Amy was a lady boy. Yeah, so anyway, Paul Gottfried, yes, is one of the main proponents of this idea. This controlled opposition, the dissident right, the alternative right. Controlled in the sense that they're being maneuvered and pitted against a characterology of the left for the convenience of the kosher folk, and also that would serve the convenience of right-wing reactionary right-wingers who are quite willing to sell out the rest of us, and they'll take the payoff with the kosher folks and liberals and neoliberals. It's a platform. It's that works very effectively as a radar screen. Is Amy Wax related to Ruby Wax? Don't know. Principles come from moral principles, which come from religion. No. They come from a negotiation between people. And so, Stephen St. James, Paul Gottfried, even though he is kind of like as an amiable demeanor, is really not so innocuous at all in terms of the framework that he is proposing. And it's surprising to me how so many people just go along with him as one of us, as like really one of the good ones, like that. Even Greg Johnson, academic agent, Iron Duke 99. A lot of people singing his virtues, and it's ridiculous. It's so clear that what's happened. I mean, and he is a student of Herbert Marcuse, and surprised to find him even speaking respectfully of Herbert Marcuse, of all the perverts and of all the anti-white sickos. Gottfried actually said that Marcuse was a proponent of free speech. Can you imagine? I mean, could there be a bigger... I mean, that's like a lie, just a flagrant lie to say that Herbert Marcuse was a proponent of free speech. And Paul Gottfried said that. Now, one of the things that Herbert Marcuse is famous for is this statement about liberating tolerance, that we should claim in the name of tolerance to allow for all speech from the quote left and none from the right, and not tolerant, or we should claim in the name of tolerance to not tolerate the intolerant. This absurd crap. But that's not a proponent of free speech, hardly. But Paul Gottfried said he was. The recent show, Paul Gottfried was saying that the Civil Rights Act was good, and that it prevented discrimination against blacks, women, others. But it only went bad when people started talking about affirmative action and things like this. Well, the Civil Rights Act was a weaponization against whites, really, is what it was. Paul Gottfried wouldn't care because he's not us. He's not one of us. But it just, my point is that just any show that you pick, that you listen to of Paul Gottfried, you can hear a guy who doesn't really care about European people. His idea of the solution is to say, oh, you just become Christians. They want to take away your Christianity and apply your universal 10 commandments, which say nothing about protecting your particular kind, and do nothing to protect your particular kind. Categorical imperative. The people you feel most oppressed by have a religion from which Christianity and Islam are derived. If Judaism is divine ethno-nationalism, then Islam is divine civic nationalism. Baloney. None of it's divine. It's all bullshit created between not very good people, to say the least. So was the 14th Amendment. It didn't raise blacks to whites. It lowered whites to the level of blacks at the time, probably. Okay. I'm gonna put the link in again. Oh wait. 2 minutes. If anybody wants to join Otherwise, I'll finish the show. It might not have been the smoothest show, but I said what I needed to say. I needed to address some things about Plato and how he commenced it. On one hand, on the pejorative side, his forms commenced the detachment, the Cartesian detachment, and on the positive side, they maintained the liberation from mere facticity that hermeneutics picked up in the sufficiently sophisticated postmodern Heideggerian way, which was to bring back Aristotle's centrality of our group praxis. Also, in a more sophisticated postmodern way. Dan Mashinkovich, why are nationalists talking about Platonism? I don't think that they are very much. The Arvel guy is, and it's kind of weird. Snorkel Blog says that he likes Plato. I don't know them talking about Plato too much, but Plato is certainly somebody, one of the people that has to be read by any normal European person and person concerned with European people and philosophy. I think that Aristotle is a little more important, but Plato has many important things to say. This correction of Maslow would be reconstructing some of Aristotle's original things that Aristotle would do with his notion of self-actualization. And again, a concentration of optimization of need satisfaction, something that Aristotle would do, contrary to Maslow, and a circulation of needs would be sort of one of the postmodern additions, corrections on the whole thing, as opposed to a linear process, let alone a quantifying Maslowian process. Arval denies that he's a nationalist for political reasons. Well, I think that Arval has some things on the most basic and important levels just wrong. I know that he said that nationalism is what creates fights between people, and he's wrong about that. It's imperialism that creates fights between people. Nationalism, when it's properly managed, when it would be unionized, as like I'm talking about, would create the kind of security and reasoning over matters of resource that would significantly decrease the motives to conflict and war. There's a reason why nobody is taught about the War of 1812. That's when the British, they burned the White House. Yeah. Well, not too many people are talking about how cunning and brutal that the Sons of the Revolution were either. All the things that they did, they were pretty wild. The things they did to the British. Americans cannot deny their British heritage. I wouldn't care to. I've always, even though I'm not English, I'm half Italian, half Polish. I've always greatly admired the English. I think that if there's one problem to the beauty of the English culture, language, the architecture, well, the land itself, the people, all that, and it's clear predominance over the American culture, is that it has over promoted itself in a way. I know that might sound funny, but to begin with, it over promoted itself in a way to the extent that other European peoples, who come from other European nations, aren't aware that their nations are good too, which you want them to be, to instill a sense of in other people that their nations and places are good enough, because you don't want them, taking after and taking up with England so much that they go there and integrate and mix up your English people. Like, I didn't know. I had no idea how nice Poland was, for example. I could have been like, really to the point of envious. Maybe I could have been, I got to go to England because it's the only beautiful place, in my country. It's just a shame. And that would have been it's going to be bad for England if too many people feel that way. But it's also wrong, because you come to Poland and you find out that it's really nice too. You don't need to go to England to have a beautiful, efficient place to live. Thormit Uns speaks a dialect of German. Cool. I like the German language. I know that sounds funny, but I like. I always like seeing like a woman speaking German. That does something for me. It's the contrast. It's ironic. You'll see like this pretty German woman speaking this kind of, well, I don't mean it in a bad way, but it's kind of a clunky language. It just creates a kind of irony. It kind of, I don't know, it's just kind of sexy. Okay, so with that, I'm going to thank you, Claire. I'm sorry that I had to shut you down, but it always goes that way, doesn't it? And let's face it, you try to provoke me. I'm just too, I'm tired right now. It's it's almost 4:30 in the morning here. So I want to thank everybody for coming. I can recommend that you listen back to the show, because I covered some of the basics. Term mit uns, I use the wrong word. I speak English with a German derivative. Okay. Well, maybe we can talk more next time. So thanks again, everybody, and bye for now.